A popular saying is, nothing is ever lost on the internet, but what is something you have been searching for years and you haven't found it yet? I tried to find the browser games I played when I was a kid. Some of them no longer exist. I sank an embarrassing amount of hours into Flash games as a kid in the early 2000s. I remember a website called Addicting Games, which would post new games every day per week or something. The internet before big streaming sites like YouTube was weird. What color is Groglin gray? Grandfather always talked about painting his house Groglin gray, but I can find no reference for it. Lol. I googled Groglin gray and it brought me to this old Reddit thread where you commented the same thing. You've been looking for a long time. This video I think I found on Vimeo of these guys working at a bong shipping facility. Apparently a customer requested a video of the process of putting together their new order for shipping. These two guys put together a great video with them dancing to Maniac by Michael Sembello throughout it. I'd love anyone who can find what I'm talking about. There was a quote that I read on the title of a post that went something like, "Just because you've gone down 90% doesn't mean you can't go down another 90%. It's related to the stock market and can also apply to life. I've wanted to find out who said that for the longest." A Reddit comment about a person who didn't know they had schizophrenia until they moved. When they lived in their apartment they had a noisy neighbor, a radio that kept playing in another unit, and could hear their upstairs neighbor constantly walking across the floor. But then they moved to a stand-alone house and they could still hear all the noises from the apartment. I remember the phrase insidious schizophrenia in there somewhere. Very haunting and well written, but I haven't been able to find it again. This one comes from my mom, a Canadian or American, based in Ontario, so we got any US channel's anti-smoking cartoon from the 70s or 80s, where a guy is smoking and says I should quit. This will be my last cigarette if I see a woman in a fur coat. And one immediately walks by. So he says, wearing green shoes. And one does. And then walking a dog, on a diamond leash. Actually, it was a tiger. And then when a woman in a fur coat wearing green shoes walking a tiger on a diamond leash walks by, he crushes his cigarette up and the tagline goes, "What will it take for you to quit? Been looking for it for ages and haven't been able to find it yet." I spent about 10 years searching for a woman I went to university with. I lived with her for 2 years and we were good friends. She was just not too hot at being contactable, like the sort of person who loses their phone every few months so just gets a new one with a new number. Anyway, she had zero web presence so was practically impossible to track down, but I figured maybe one day she would make herself known. Well, one day she did. Turns out she got married and had a young kid, and lived about 3 hours away. We spoke on Facebook for quite a while, and I thought I'd see if she wanted to meet up sometime, and then she died. It turns out she just made a Facebook profile to contact her old friends one last time and see how they were doing. She never even told me she was ill. Sometimes she pops up in my dreams and we have a chat there. Around 12 to 13 years ago, I got into StumbleUpon, which was a Firefox extension that adds a button to your screen that takes you to a random page that someone marked as interesting. Once, I found a Flash animation that portrayed a recreation of a white hat hacker doing a penetration test on a web application. The whole thing was a Linux command shell without any GUI. It started with an IRC chat where someone asks the hacker to look into his application and sent him a URL and another URL for the source code. After a sped up 3 minutes of curl, grep, and SSH, the hacker built a command line script that can pull any username and email from the site. Never found it again. Thanks Zalmiak for finding the video. It's called 0 Day by Mulworm. 12 to 13 years ago, I got into StumbleUpon. I can't help you but wanted to relate. StumbleUpon was revolutionary in the late '00s, especially since you could tick off the kind of content you're into and then take off clicking without any kind of community surrounding the content curation. In 2003, there was a commercial for I Think E-Trade where a CEO retires and hands the company over to his stoner bro grandson whose entire press conference is him saying "I'm so stoked." Everyone dumps the stock immediately and the ad was about how quickly you could trade using E-Trade. My family loved that commercial to the point where we had shirts made that said "I'm so stoked." I have looked through a lot of commercial compilations in YouTube, but have still never found that ad. Didn't find the commercial, but I did find an old forum post searching for the same thing. Either you've been searching for a long time, or you're not the only one wondering. Where the quote, "I wanted 16 candles Molly Ringwald, not pretty in pink Molly Ringwald," comes from. An electronic copy of the Machine Gun Dealer's Bible, which I bet a coworker years ago I could find, in an effort to prevent myself from owing him $5. I am still looking for it. Back in the 2000s I was eagerly awaiting the release of the latest Harry Potter book. At the time there was a theory going around that a copy of the book was released for Obama's Bush's kids to read or something like that, and it had leaked onto the internet. This led to teenage me searching high and low for it and finally coming across a downloadable 600-plus page book. I spent days reading it on my family's PC. It was amazing and I had it early. It wasn't till Harry and Ginny had sex together for the first time that I realized I was probably not reading the real book. Still, it was good. I finished the book and was shocked when the real one came out and shared a lot of similar storyline minus the sex, of course. My first dip into fanfic. Around 1999 I had borrowed a digital camera from school and took a lot of pictures of friends and stuff. It was back when people really didn't carry around cameras except for special activities. I remember uploading them to my brother's university Unix shell account to share with some people, but when he graduated and that account closed I lost access and didn't have any backups. Really wish I still had those photos. Nobody has them. All the shitty Fruity Loops music I made in my early 20s that was on MySpace. All through school they taught us you can never truly delete anything online, and even if you delete it someone can still find it. While this may be true if you seriously pissed off a master computer hacker, but for the average person this claim is completely BS. I went on a few dates with a girl a few summers ago and I really liked her. All of a sudden though she just vanished. Like her Snapchat was deactivated. Completely disappeared off Facebook, Instagram, everything. I tried texting her a couple of times but she never responded. I got a little worried because she's not the type of girl to ghost like that, and she struggles with suicidal thoughts and mental health issues, so you can see why this might be concerning. Since she wasn't responding and I didn't really know any of her friends to ask about her, I went full social media creep mode to try and at least find out what happened to her. I figured if she had killed herself there would be something online about it. Well, I didn't find anything. Like literally no evidence that this girl even existed besides a picture of her on her brother's Facebook page. I didn't even know she had a brother. He was just the only person that came up if you searched her name on Facebook. Googling her name also yielded no results. Since I could literally find nothing about her online, I figured she had just blocked me for some reason and I eventually gave up. I tried searching her on Facebook a couple times over the next year or so, but nothing ever came up. This past summer she popped up in my Snapchat friend suggestions, and honestly it was such a relief to finally see some evidence that she was alive. I added her not expecting her to add me back, but she did, and she actually messaged me. We met up again and went for a hike and grabbed dinner together to catch up. Turns out she was going through some rough times and didn't want to talk to anyone and disappeared, but she's doing much better now. Things didn't work out with us romantically again, but she's still one of my closest friends now. The night that Tony Hawk did the first 900 back at the 99X Games, they played a music video-like thing with feeders the perfect day showing all his misses and then finally the hit. It basically doesn't exist and it bothers me. Have you tried tweeting at him? If there's anyone who would have a video archive of the X Games, it's Tony Hawk. A quote from a book, maybe Lundy Bancroft, about how to get a friend out of an abusive relationship. I want the original source. I believe it was in a Q&A format that ran a bit like this in ideas, but not phrasing. Q. My friend is in an abusive relationship, but she won't allow us to help her leave it. How do we safely get her out? A. You don't. You need to offer her the opposite of what her abuser is. Choices. Allow her to socialize with whom she wishes. Even her abuser, because he's probably isolating her. Forgive her for being flaky, because he may not be. Allow her to choose for herself even if you disagree with the choice, because that's the opposite of what he's doing. She has to decide to leave by herself. Around 10 years ago I was using StumbleUpon and found a website outlining a mysterious expedition into a New England wood where a portal to an alternate dimension allegedly exists. Something about a group that went into the portal and never returned. Something else about an upcoming expedition to follow the first. The alternate dimension is an America much like our own but uncolonized and pristine. There were even schematics to a sort of chair that made the trip easier. The most curious part to me was the direction for finding the forest and the expedition group. Something to the effect of, if you found this website you have either been searching for us for a long time or you are meant to find us according to the will of the universe. If you are to continue your journey you will be able to solve the riddle hidden in this page. I'd be lying if I said this didn't pique my curiosity, and I've been looking for the website ever since. I've attempted to figure it out with StumbleUpon and I swear I bookmarked the page but no such luck. This old French website that hosted these pixel clip art versions of Disney characters. Because the outlines were single pixels wide and there was no compression, little me could save them and recolor or edit them in MS Paint easily. I basically made a whole drag and drop dress-up game in Paint using their Tinker Bell and Jasmine. Like I don't have much use for it these days, but I look for it occasionally just for nostalgia purposes. Last time I used that site, I must have been like 12. It's been well over a decade. An Antique Roadshow episode where the appraiser asked the owner if they had cleaned a priceless Milanese helm. They responded, "I hit it with a Lil Lemon pledge," and the appraiser visibly shivers.